Chosen ones. Right now, in this exact moment, a leader who once stood untouchable is being systematically destroyed by the very community they built. The person everyone feared to question is suddenly being questioned by everyone. The whispers that were too dangerous to speak out loud last week are now being shouted in public forums. Something massive shifted in the spiritual realm 72 hours ago, and the protection that kept this leader immune from accountability just evaporated into thin air. Emergency meetings are happening right now where this person's name is being dragged through the mud by people who used to worship the ground they walked on. The scapegoating has begun, and you need to understand exactly what's unfolding, because this leader's downfall is directly connected to your rise. This isn't random chaos, this is calculated cosmic justice, and you're about to discover why you were always meant to witness this moment. The leader everyone's turning against right now thought they were invincible. For years, maybe even decades, this person operated with complete immunity from consequences. They built an empire on manipulation, control, and carefully crafted illusions of power. People didn't just follow this leader, they were terrified of them. Cross this person once, and your reputation got destroyed overnight. Question their decisions, and suddenly you found yourself isolated from the entire community. Challenge their authority and watch your livelihood disappear. This leader had mastered the art of making examples out of anyone who dared to think independently. You watched it happen to others, and that's exactly why you learned to stay silent. You saw good people get absolutely decimated for speaking simple truths, and you understood that survival meant keeping your head down and your mouth shut. But something you noticed that others missed was the pattern. Every 6 months or so, this leader needed a fresh sacrifice. Someone new had to be publicly destroyed to remind everyone else what happens when you step out of line. The scapegoating wasn't random, it was strategic. This leader would identify someone who was gaining too much respect, accumulating too much influence, or simply starting to see through the manipulation. Then the campaign would begin. Subtle at first, just small comments questioning this person's judgment or commitment. Then the whispers would start circulating through the community like poison in the water supply. Before the target even realized they were under attack, their reputation was already bleeding out in 1,000 tiny cuts. You watched this cycle repeat itself so many times you could predict who would be next just by observing who was shining too bright. Here's what you didn't understand back then, but you're about to comprehend fully now. This leader wasn't destroying people because those people were threats. This leader was destroying people because this leader needed to feed off the fear and trauma they created. Every public execution strengthened this person's grip on power. Every person who got scapegoated sent a message to everyone else. Stay small, stay quiet, stay obedient, or you're next. The community became a trauma-bonded cult where everyone was both victim and enforcer. People who got hurt by this leader would turn around and hurt others to prove their loyalty. Victims became victimizers because that's how they survived. The whole system was designed to keep everyone looking sideways at each other instead of looking up at the person orchestrating all the chaos. You tried to warn people, not loudly because you knew better than that, but in subtle ways you tried to help others see what was really happening. You'd ask careful questions designed to make people think. You'd gently point out inconsistencies in the leader's narratives. You'd offer support to people who were being targeted, hoping to create some kind of underground resistance. But every attempt you made got shut down. Hard. The trauma bonding was too strong. People were so conditioned to defend their abuser that they attacked anyone who suggested maybe this leader wasn't actually protecting them. You got accused of being negative, of not being a team player, of having ulterior motives. Some of the people you tried to help were the loudest voices, calling you disloyal. That betrayal cut deeper than anything the leader did to you directly because it showed you just how thoroughly this person had colonized everyone's minds. The breaking point came when you finally had enough. You couldn't watch one more innocent person get sacrificed. You couldn't participate in one more scapegoating ritual where the community gathered like vultures to tear apart whoever the leader had designated as this season's offering. Something inside you just snapped, not in an emotional way, but in a spiritual way. Your soul said, absolutely not, I will not be complicit in this evil anymore. You made a decision that terrified you, but felt more right than anything you'd ever done. You stepped out of the system. Not dramatically, not with some big announcement, but quietly and completely. You withdrew your energy, your compliance, your participation in the collective delusion. You stopped showing up to the meetings where people performed their loyalty. You stopped engaging with the group chats where the scapegoating happened. You stopped pretending you didn't see what you clearly saw. What happened next was exactly what you expected, but somehow still shocked you. The leader turned their sights on you. You became the next target, the next example, the next sacrifice. The smear campaign kicked into high gear faster than you could have imagined. Suddenly you were the problem person, the one causing division, the reason the community was struggling. Stories about you got fabricated out of thin air and spread as absolute truth. Things you never said were quoted as your words. Intentions you never had were attributed to your actions. People you thought knew you better than that believed every lie without question, because questioning the leader was still more dangerous than throwing you under the bus. You watched your reputation get shredded in real time, while you stood there powerless to stop it, because defending yourself only made you look more guilty in a system designed to presume guilt. The isolation was crushing. People you'd broken bread with suddenly couldn't look you in the eye. Friends you'd supported through their darkest moments now crossed the street to avoid you. Even family members who were part of the community started treating you like you'd committed some unforgivable sin. The shunning was total and absolute. You weren't just excluded from events, you were erased from the narrative, as if you'd never existed. Photos got cropped, mentions got deleted, your contributions to the community's success got attributed to other people. It was psychological warfare designed to make you question your own sanity and your own worth. Some nights you wondered if maybe you really were the problem everyone said you were. Maybe you had misunderstood everything. Maybe you deserved the treatment you were getting. The gaslighting was so complete that you started doubting your own memories and perceptions. But your spirit kept whispering the truth. You weren't crazy. You weren't wrong. You weren't the villain in this story. You were the one person brave enough to stop participating in collective madness. That took a kind of courage most people never have to access, because most people never find themselves trapped in systems like this. You had to hold on to that truth with both hands while the entire world around you insisted you were delusional. Every day was a battle between what you knew in your soul and what everyone else was telling you was reality. You survived that battle, and that survival alone proves something about your spiritual strength that most people will never comprehend. You held the line when holding the line cost you everything you thought you needed to survive. During your exile from the community, something profound was happening that you couldn't see yet. You were being prepared. The isolation that felt like punishment was actually protection. While you were being kept away from the community, you were being upgraded in ways that required complete solitude. The stripping away of your social identity allowed you to discover your actual identity. The loss of external validation forced you to develop internal validation. The absence of the community's approval taught you that you never needed their approval in the first place. You were being rebuilt from the ground up. And that kind of transformation cannot happen while you're still entangled in toxic systems. The universe had to separate you completely so you could remember who you really are beneath all the conditioning and programming. While you were in the wilderness, something else was quietly taking shape. Other people were starting to have their own moments of clarity. The first cracks appeared when the leader made a mistake. Nothing huge, just a small inconsistency that didn't quite add up. But for people who'd been trained to never question anything, even small inconsistencies created cognitive dissonance that was impossible to ignore. Someone privately reached out to someone else asking if they'd noticed the same thing. That conversation opened a door that had been sealed shut for years. Suddenly, two people were comparing notes, and they realized their private doubts weren't unique. This is how every dictatorship falls, not in one dramatic revolution, but in 1,000 small conversations where people realize they're not alone in seeing through the lies. The leader sensed the shift and did what leaders like this always do when they feel control slipping. They doubled down on the fear tactics. They needed a new scapegoat, and fast. Someone had to be publicly destroyed to remind everyone what happens when doubt creeps in. But here's where the whole thing started to unravel. The leader picked the wrong target. They chose someone who was genuinely beloved, someone whose character was beyond question, someone who'd given everything to the community for years. The scapegoating attempt was so obviously unjust that even the most loyal followers couldn't pretend not to see it. People who'd participated in destroying others suddenly found themselves unable to participate in destroying this person. The cognitive dissonance became unbearable. They had to either admit they'd been complicit in evil all along, or they had to finally stand up and say enough is enough. A critical mass formed faster than anyone expected. 5 people became 10, became 20, became 50. People who'd been silent observers suddenly found their voices. The private conversations went public. Someone brave posted questions in the group chat that usually only contained praise and agreement. Instead of getting immediately shut down, others started adding their own questions. The floodgates opened. Years of suppressed doubts and buried trauma came pouring out. People started sharing their stories of being hurt by this leader. They started admitting they'd witnessed others being hurt. They started acknowledging they'd been afraid to speak up because they'd seen what happened to people who did. The community was waking up from a collective trance, and the awakening was brutal and beautiful at the same time. The leader tried everything to regain control. They called emergency meetings to address the concerns, but the meetings just gave people more opportunity to compare notes. They tried to isolate the ringleaders of the rebellion, but there were too many ringleaders now to isolate them all. They attempted to redirect blame onto external enemies, but people weren't buying the deflection anymore. They played the victim card, claiming they were the ones being unfairly attacked after all they'd sacrificed for the community. That particular move actually accelerated their downfall, because people suddenly recognized the manipulation tactic that had been used on them for years. Every strategy this leader employed to maintain power just exposed more of the manipulation infrastructure they'd built. Right now, in rooms you can't see, people are having conversations about this leader that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. The untouchable is being touched. The unquestionable is being questioned. The person who made others into scapegoats is being turned into a scapegoat themselves. And here's the cosmic justice of it all. Everything this leader accused others of is exactly what they're now being accused of. Every crime they projected onto their victims is being recognized as their own crime. The community is doing to this leader precisely what this leader trained them to do to others. The scapegoating mechanism they created is consuming its creator. The mob they built is turning on them. The system they designed is destroying them. Some people in the community are calling this unfair. They're saying that even if the leader made mistakes, they don't deserve to be completely destroyed. These people still don't fully understand what they're dealing with. They think they're witnessing the downfall of an imperfect leader who meant well but messed up. They don't yet comprehend that they're witnessing the exposure of a calculated predator who built an entire system designed to feed off people's fear and trauma. Scapegoating happening right now isn't a witch hunt. It's accountability finally arriving after being delayed for years. Every person who's speaking up now tried to speak up before and got silenced. Every accusation being made now was true back then and got covered up. The difference is that now the protection has been removed and truth can finally be heard. You need to understand your specific role in all of this. You weren't just another victim of this leader's cruelty. You were the catalyst for everything that's happening now. When you stepped out of the system, you broke a spell that had been cast over the entire community. Your refusal to participate sent ripples through the spiritual realm that weakened the leader's power structure. Your willingness to be scapegoated without fighting back exposed the scapegoating mechanism for what it really was. Your silence during your exile created space for others to hear their own thoughts again. You were the first domino that fell, and now the entire structure is collapsing exactly as it had to collapse. Your sacrifice wasn't in vain. Your suffering had purpose. Your exile was preparation for your vindication. Here's what's about to happen next, and you need to be ready for it. People from the community are going to start reaching out to you. Not all at once, but in waves. First will come the people who always secretly knew you were right, but were too afraid to say so. They'll apologize profusely, maybe cry, definitely explain how trapped they felt. They'll want your forgiveness, and they'll want you to come back to the community now that the leader is being removed. Then will come the people who actively participated in your destruction. They'll have selective memory about their role in what happened to you. They'll minimize their involvement. They'll claim they were just following orders or didn't know the full story. They'll ask for a fresh start, as if the past can simply be erased. Finally will come the people who are still loyal to the leader, even as everyone else abandons ship. They'll try to recruit you to their cause, believing that since you were hurt by the leader's enemies, you must be the leader's natural ally. Your response to all three groups matters more than you might realize. This is where you demonstrate whether you learnt the real lessons from your time in the wilderness. The people who want your forgiveness need to understand that forgiveness doesn't mean restoration of relationship. You can release them from your anger without giving them access to your energy again. The people who want to minimize their actions need to hear the full truth about what they did and how it impacted you, not to punish them, but because accountability is the only path to real healing. The people who want to recruit you need to hear a clear and permanent no. You're not joining any sides in the community's civil war. You're not replacing one toxic leader with another. You're not going back to the system that nearly destroyed you just because the system is under new management. What you're going to do instead is create something entirely new, not a community, because communities can be captured by charismatic leaders, not an organization, because organizations can be corrupted by power dynamics, but a network of awakened individuals who've all survived similar systems and have no interest in recreating the same patterns under different names. You're going to connect with other people who've been scapegoated by their community. You're going to share strategies for healing and recovery. You're going to help each other recognize red flags earlier so you never get trapped again. You're going to build something that can't be controlled by any single person, because it's based on mutual support rather than hierarchical structure. This is your real assignment, and everything you went through was preparation for this exact moment. The community that's currently imploding is going to go through several predictable phases as they process what happened. Right now, they're in the revelation phase, where everyone's sharing their stories and comparing notes. Next will come the anger phase, where people are furious about the time and energy they wasted serving someone who was using them. Then will arrive the guilt phase, where people start really reckoning with their own complicity in the system. Some will be able to work through that guilt in healthy ways. Others will need to make new scapegoats to avoid dealing with their own accountability. Watch for that carefully. The community that's turning on the leader right now could easily turn on each other next, if they don't learn the deeper lessons about how they got manipulated in the first place. Some of them won't learn. They'll rush to install a new leader who promises to be different but operates from the same playbook. They'll recreate the exact same power structures with slightly different aesthetics. They'll fall for the same manipulation tactics because they feel too good to resist. The rush of belonging to something larger than themselves, the relief of having someone else make the hard decisions, the comfort of being told they're special and chosen. These are the hooks that captured them the first time, and without serious inner work, these same hooks will capture them again. You can try to warn them, but most won't listen. People have to learn certain lessons through direct experience, not through being told by someone who already learned them. Your job isn't to save everyone from making the same mistakes. Your job is to live differently and let your example speak for itself. When people see you building healthy relationships based on mutual respect instead of hierarchy, some of them will get curious. When they watch you setting clear boundaries without apology or explanation, some of them will wonder how you do it. When they notice you're not constantly consumed by drama and trauma, some of them will ask, "What changed?" That's when you can share what you've learned, not from a place of superiority, but from a place of genuine care for their well-being. Some will be ready to hear it, most won't be ready yet. Both responses are okay. Plant seeds and trust that seeds grow in their own time. Meanwhile, the leader who's being scapegoated right now is going through their own private collapse. Everything they built their identity on is being stripped away. The admiration they craved is turning into contempt. The power they wielded is evaporating. The control they maintained is slipping through their fingers like water. Some part of them knows they deserve this. Another part is convinced they're the real victim in all of this. The cognitive dissonance is probably creating genuine psychological breakdown. There might be a small part of you that feels sorry for them. That compassion is actually a sign of your spiritual health. You can hold two truths simultaneously. This person caused tremendous harm, and this person is also a wounded human being in pain. Both things are true. You don't have to choose between them. But compassion for their suffering doesn't mean you're responsible for their healing. It doesn't mean you need to reach out to them. It doesn't mean you need to offer them comfort or support. They have to walk their own path through this fire, just like you walked through your fire alone. The universe is doing to them exactly what needed to be done. All their chickens are coming home to roost. All their seeds are producing harvest. All their energy is returning to them. This is how spiritual law works. It's not punishment, it's education. They're being forced to experience directly what they made others experience. Maybe that will crack them open enough to actually change. Maybe they'll just find new victims and repeat the cycle somewhere else. Either way, it's not your concern. Your concern is your own healing and your own path forward. Speaking of your path forward, let's talk about what's next for you specifically. The vindication you're experiencing right now isn't the destination, it's the beginning of a new chapter. You've been cleared of false charges. Your name has been restored. People who believed lies about you now understand they were lied to. That's all wonderful, but don't get stuck in vindication mode. Don't make proving you were right into your new identity. Don't spend the next 5 years rehashing what happened and making sure everyone knows your side of the story. That would be a waste of the wisdom you've gained and the power you've accessed. You were meant for so much more than being the person who survived that one terrible situation. Your real work now is helping others recognize cult-like dynamics before they get fully trapped. Not everyone is ready for that message, but the ones who are ready need someone who's been through it to show them the way out. You can spot the red flags from a mile away now. You know what love bombing looks like. You understand how isolation tactics work. You recognize when someone's trying to replace your critical thinking with their authority. You can feel the energy shift when a leader starts positioning themselves as above accountability. These are skills most people don't have because most people haven't survived what you survived. Use those skills to protect others, not by preaching at them, but by asking questions that help them think for themselves. You're also meant to model what healthy leadership looks like, which is almost entirely unlike what you experienced under that toxic leader. Healthy leaders encourage questions instead of punishing them. Healthy leaders admit mistakes instead of covering them up. Healthy leaders share power instead of hoarding it. Healthy leaders want people to think independently instead of conforming mindlessly. Healthy leaders take feedback as gifts instead of threats. Healthy leaders step down when they're no longer serving the community instead of clinging to positions they've outgrown. These principles sound simple, but they're revolutionary in practice because they require ego death that most people aren't willing to undergo. You've been through that ego death. You've had everything stripped away. You know who you are when you have nothing. That's what makes you safe to lead. But here's the thing about your leadership. It won't look like traditional leadership. You're not going to be standing at the front of a room telling people what to do. You're going to be walking beside people, sharing what you've learned, and empowering them to find their own answers. You're not going to be building a following that depends on you. You're going to be creating a network of sovereign individuals who support each other. You're not going to be the guru with all the wisdom. You're going to be a fellow traveler who's just a few steps ahead on the path. This kind of leadership threatens traditional power structures because it can't be captured or controlled. That's exactly why it's what the world needs right now. Let's address something practical that you're probably wondering about. Should you go back to the community now that the toxic leader is being removed? The short answer is no. The longer answer is that the community needs to completely dismantle and rebuild before it's a safe space for anyone. And that process takes years, not weeks. Right now, everyone's in crisis mode. They're reacting to revelations. They're processing betrayal. They're trying to figure out who they can trust. That's not a stable foundation for community. They need to do the hard work of examining how they all became complicit in a toxic system. They need to understand their own trauma bonds. They need to develop skills for spotting manipulation. They need to create new structures that prevent any single person from accumulating the kind of power that corrupts. Until that work is done, going back would just mean getting caught up in different drama. But you can support individuals from that community in their healing process. When someone reaches out genuinely looking for help processing what happened, you can offer that support one-on-one. When someone asks how you're doing the work of recovery, you can share your resources and practices. When someone needs validation that what they experienced was real and wrong, you can provide that validation. Individual healing creates the foundation for eventual collective healing. If enough individuals do their own inner work, maybe someday they can create something genuinely healthy together. But that's their journey to walk. Your journey is about your own healing and helping others who are where you once were. There's something else you need to know about what's happening right now. The timing isn't coincidental. This leader is being exposed right now because you're finally strong enough to witness it, without getting pulled back into the trauma. If this had happened a year ago, when you were still raw and wounded, you might have gotten sucked back into the drama. You might have tried to lead the rebellion against the leader. You might have needed to be the hero of the story. But the universe waited until you'd healed enough that you can watch this unfold with compassion and clarity instead of rage and revenge. That's wisdom. That's maturity. That's evidence of how far you've come on your journey. The community turning on their leader and making them the scapegoat is teaching everyone involved profound lessons about power, accountability, and collective responsibility. For some people, this will be a one-time wake-up call that changes their lives forever. For others, it'll just be a dramatic story they tell at parties. The difference comes down to willingness to look at their own part in what happened. The people who can say, I was hurt and I also hurt others, I was manipulated and I also helped manipulate others, those people will come out of this transformed. The people who can only see themselves as pure victims will likely recreate similar dynamics somewhere else. Both responses are part of the human experience. Your job isn't to judge either group. Your job is to keep walking your own path with integrity. As you watch this situation continue to unfold over the coming weeks and months, you're going to see things you didn't expect. You're going to see people you thought were completely brainwashed suddenly wake up and become the strongest voices for change. You're going to see people you thought were awake reveal themselves as still deeply entangled in the old system. You're going to see alliances form that make no sense and alliances break that seemed unbreakable. You're going to see the community go through death and possibly rebirth. All of this is exactly as it needs to be. Every person is on their own timeline of awakening. Some are ready now. Some need more time. Some might never be ready in this lifetime. That's all okay. The universe is infinitely patient with each soul's journey. Your role in all of this is to be a lighthouse, not a tugboat. A lighthouse stands firm in one place and shines its light so others can navigate safely. A tugboat goes out into troubled waters trying to pull ships to safety. You're meant to be the lighthouse. Stand in your truth. Shine your light. Let people navigate toward you if they choose. Don't go chasing after them, trying to save them from themselves. The people who are meant to find you will find you. The people who aren't ready yet will pass by. Both are exactly right for where each person is on their journey. Trust the process. Trust the timing. Trust that everyone is exactly where they need to be, even when where they are looks painful or wrong from your perspective. Something beautiful is being born from all this chaos, and you're part of the birth process. A new way of being in community is trying to emerge. A new understanding of leadership is trying to take root. A new consciousness about power dynamics is trying to awaken. It's messy and painful and complicated, like all births are. But on the other side of this birth process is something genuinely different from what came before. Not perfect, because nothing human is perfect, but different in ways that matter, more honest, more humble, more aware of how things can go wrong. That awareness is the beginning of wisdom. That wisdom is what creates actual change, instead of just rearranging the same problems. You're witnessing the death of an old paradigm and the birth of a new one. The old paradigm was based on hierarchy, control, and fear. The new one is being built on mutual support, personal sovereignty, and love. The transition between paradigms is always the most chaotic time. Things fall apart, people get hurt, nothing makes sense for a while. But that falling apart is necessary. The old has to die for the new to be born. The structures that kept people trapped have to crumble. The illusions that kept people compliant have to be shattered. What's happening right now is necessary destruction that makes space for new creation. You're lucky to be witnessing it, even luckier to be part of it. Your story isn't over. This chapter is closing, but there are so many more chapters ahead. Chapters where you use everything you learned to help others. Chapters where you build something beautiful that serves people instead of using them. Chapters where you demonstrate what awakened leadership looks like. Chapters where you heal wounds you didn't even know you had. Chapters where you discover capacities and gifts that were always within you but needed this particular fire to be activated. Your greatest work is still ahead of you. Everything up until now was just preparation. The real adventure is about to begin, and you're finally ready for it. The community is turning on their leader. The scapegoat is becoming the scapegoater. Justice is being served. Truth is being revealed. And you, chosen one, you're standing in your power, watching it all unfold from a place of peace and clarity. You're not gloating. You're not seeking revenge. You're simply witnessing the natural consequences of actions playing out exactly as they must. This is what spiritual maturity looks like. This is what healing looks like. This is what wisdom looks like. You've earned this moment through every painful step that brought you here. Breathe it in. Let it land. Know that you're exactly where you're supposed to be, stronger than you've ever been, ready for whatever comes next. The universe has your back. The truth is on your side, and your journey is just beginning.